41% of the helmets showed no damage at all. We saw all the helmets that were impacts to the road sustained some sort of damage. Now, majority of the impacts of turf did have damage that we noticed, but we also noticed, again, this kind of 35, so about a third of them pops up with no damage. And again, they're looking at the liner, so we can see there's a large proportion of those turf impacts in the red that have no damage. So kind of what are the initial kind of findings from this? So all the road impacts had sustained damage. So this, we kind of expect this because the way it stands currently is an impact to a hard surface. So we expect it to absorb energy in this case. More significantly, however, was that 35%, 7 of the cases that we saw no damage, and five of which were concussive. So in this case, people have had an accident, and the helmet has no evidence of absorbing any energy. Two possible factors. One is the impact did not occur on the helmet, and the second one could potentially be because from other research we know the helmet is actually relatively soft, so it can be absorbing the energy rather than the helmet itself. So just kind of sum up a little bit about the standards. So again, you have the rigid surface standard. There's also a lateral crush kind of one, and a new proposed standards coming out is onto an angled surface to kind of elicit rotation of the head. So kind of one thing that we want to do is, okay, now that we're trying to introduce these rotational tests, we want to have a head form that accurately reflects this. So the head forms that are currently developed have been adopted from a car crash and based on linear acceleration. But we wanted to develop a head form with kind of from a broad range of literature with correct mass and inertial properties so we can develop properly measured rotational accelerations. As well, the anvil that we're impacting. So we wanted to research into that and to kind of develop a turf surrogate anvil that could be used to test helmets in a more realistic condition. And kind of just the comparison of real-world accidents to the standards. So the standard as it is today is in blue on the slide there, and then that proposed standard onto that surface is in red. And then those kind of crosses are the concussive injuries. So you can see there's a wide kind of disconnect between what the standards currently are testing to where the injuries are happening. So we want to develop tests that can better reflect those. And those are kind of the triangles and the little crosses that are within the injury concussions there. So these might be solutions to better represent what's actually happening in the real world. As well, kind of dynamic crush. So at the moment, it's just a kind of quasi-static test. So we want to see if the horse is actually landing on you with significant motion. So we want to develop a head form for that, and as well a horse surrogate model so we can test helmets in these crush environments. So kind of the take-home messages from this are that the in-depth kind of analysis of video and helmets will greatly help us to understand brain injury and helmet performance. So at the moment, the standards may not reflect the conditions that the injuries are happening in, and the helmets may not be providing adequate protection. So standards, methods, and helmet designs could improve by accounting for those common impact scenarios. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michie, and congratulations for doing that at fairly short notice. And Michael, I hope you enjoyed that. The third paper in this session on equestrian safety is looking at the use of data to manage risk in equestrianism. And I'm delighted we've got Sam Watson, who's the founder of EquiRatings, who's going to give us a chat about data-driven risk management. Sam, over to you.
Thank you. Your Royal Highness, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having me. A very interesting morning so far, an interesting afternoon. And one of the things that I took away this morning was that things are changing all the time and attitudes are changing. One of the biggest changes for me is that there's an Irish event rider now talking about risk management. And to prove that I am Irish, I served a bit of time over here as a young rider, learning how to ride, and I was sent a young racehorse, and the horse didn't steer very well, so the Irish boy had to ride it. And then once I got it steering a little bit better, they said he also doesn't jump very well, so I had to jump him too. And I took the horse out onto a cross-country course that they had, and I found one fence was causing us a bit of bother as I was climbing back onto the horse for the second time. And the man who had built the fence came out and said, "Irish, you're jumping the fence the wrong way round." I've learned a lot since then. I've gone to university since then as well, where I studied data analysis and statistical analysis. And thankfully I lost all my brain cells, and I managed to do quite well in university. But then you can still question my sanity, because I then went on to be an event writer for the next 10 years, having graduated. I didn't have an original idea when I thought about applying data analysis to equestrian sports. I was copying a lot of people. It actually started back in the 12th century when knights were trying to capture titles and things like that. That was my co-founder put that in there, and it kind of shocked me when I saw a 12th century knight up there. The people that I was inspired by were Bill James in baseball. When recruiting players in sport, everybody used to go off their instinct and their intuition, and that's something that we do a lot in equestrian sports, and it's something that's very important, and it's something not to be lost. But actually what analysis can do and what data can do is it has the power to quantify ability rather than just using intuition, and the margin for human error and for human bias as well to come into it. And so this is why I started the analysis. I wanted to see what it took to win, aside from just being a genius or a god or these things that I couldn't quantify and I couldn't aim for because it was intangible. I actually wanted numbers and metrics to hit. And there's good examples there of how it's being embraced now with rugby and cricket, and of course British cycling as well, where one of the things that they talk about there is marginal gains. They measure everything for a 1% gain across the board, and that leads to a much bigger gain. And we acknowledge our role in safety. The data analysis, in particular performance analysis, which is the area we'll get onto, it is just one of the tools, and there's a lot of things going on that are really positive towards horse welfare and towards risk management, from fence design to safety equipment, and we've seen examples of that. What we do essentially is we had good talk about databases earlier and all this data and the quality of it. We try and turn that into insight, and we do it for three reasons really: risk management, team performance, which we call high performance, and fan engagement. So we take the Olympic Games last year in the sport of eventing. There was a horse there called the Biostatic Sam, ridden by Michael Young. They went on to win the gold medal. Now, a bit of insight there from a fan engagement point of view is that horse in London became the only horse in the modern era of the sport to on his dressage score. That's 2 of the show jumping and to go clear inside the time cross country. And what he managed to do in Rio is he repeated the feat. So it's now only been done twice, but it's been done twice by the same horse and rider 4 years apart. So that's one to engage the sport, and by giving people information, which when we watch Wimbledon now and we hear about percentage of break points won and speeds of second serves and all this, fans and people who enjoy sport actually crave information. When you see the titles sort of data-driven risk management, it doesn't sound too exciting, particularly after lunch on a Thursday. But actually, data can be exciting. Team performance, the man who designed the cross-country course at Rio had designed 2 championships before, and a European Championships and a World Championships, and the Olympics was his 3rd championships. On all the occasions, he managed to produce a clear rate of 42%, all in very different conditions, but that's why we call him Michio the Menace, because usually you'd be about 55% clear rate, maybe even 60% clear rate. So that was a tough, challenging course, and that's to give insight to the managers to say, just watch out at the cross-country. 15 combinations out of 65, so 15 horses and riders, who went to Rio with less than a 50% success rate at 3- and 4-star level going into the Olympics. So they're coming in on the cross-country. Don't wish history on us, or I'll get time penalties myself in this presentation. My business partner, top left there, Jim McByrne, was a commercial lawyer. We were in college together in university, and without him, like any event writer, nothing would actually get done if I didn't have somebody to me to do everything. He's always found data sport fascinating, and at badminton in 2015, someone who had known nothing about horses, he never came to watch me do any events when we were in college, He was too busy chatting up girls, and then he actually, at my wedding, met an event writer, and that started to follow the sport. But he found himself at badminton starting to help out with the commentary, and this was someone who'd known nothing about eventing, and commentators were saying, how are you then, this person high performance level back in 2015 as well, and we launched this quality index, which we get onto in more detail as well in 2015. Everything has escalated since then. We're media services, more events, helping more Olympic teams, and our risk management has now spread. It's diversified from just eventing into the sport of endurance, and now also into racing as well. We're starting to look at that, all investigative stages at the moment. Our philosophy is that risk management can be managed efficiently. So I talked to a very wise event writer who probably had one fall 20 who said, I don't fall off half as much anymore. And I said, yeah, but you ride a third as much. So that wasn't efficient fall prevention. He was actually inefficient. He was actually falling more for the amount he was riding. But the efficiency of it is important. We don't want to halve our risk by halving our participation. That's not what we want to achieve. Recognizing the relationship between performance and risk. That's very important. Speed is a risk factor, and it is with driving. So we have speed limits on our roads, but we still allow Formula One because that's the top level of the sport. And I think we have to be very careful that this great sport that we have will push the boundaries of high performance, but we want to do it safe. So that's very much our philosophy behind our analysis. It gives us this risk matrix of the relationship between performance and risk. High performance, low risk, that is the mecca. That's what we're looking for. These athletes at all levels of the sport, whether it's the Cheltenham Festival or whether it's the Olympic Games, who can perform to the very top level, and we can all really admire the horse in all its glory, performing to the top of its level, and they can do so safely. That's what we're looking for. What we've got to be careful is when we're performing to the top level, but the risk is high. It's 50-50. We're exposing ourselves to risk. That's what we have to manage, and sometimes make quite difficult decisions. Low performance, low risk, that is participation. That is what, probably 95%, that's what we want it to be as well. I say lower levels of performance. My wife is an amateur eventer, and she wins far more rosettes than I do. So it's not about performing poorly, it's about a lower level, pushing the boundaries. So that's where actually an analysis system to take the human bias out of it. I wouldn't want to be the team manager, I wouldn't want to be the official that has to tell some of these people that you shouldn't be competing today at this level, it should be at the level below. Measure and manage. So that's a big motto we have, and you'll get that from what we've talked about. That's just a normal distribution curve. Most of us sit in the middle of that. In terms of performance and in terms of risk as well, was to the left-hand side of the curve. That didn't need to happen. That was just particularly Irish of me. Our objective, acceptable risk. That's a word, a phrase that I want people to think about. Acceptable levels of risk. It's impossible to remove it completely. I got on an airplane here this morning. I had to drive to get to the airport. I've been taking on risk the whole time. Risk, that's an important thing to think about. So we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for what we can cope with in the sport. Our strategy is, we've heard this morning about raising standards. It's to look at the lower levels of performance where the highest levels of risk tend to be. And that's the work that our team have been doing is in showing that's where the efficiency can come. And by actually working on the left-hand side of that curve you saw where the risk is particularly high, by addressing that and redirecting it to a level where they are at lower risk, that's how we can raise the standards. Rather than trying to make fences smaller or to reduce speeds or to do anything like that, which will actually take quite an element of the sport away. We want to be able to have high performance, but we want to have it safely. And then our tactic is to produce these ratings and to quantify the risk. My wife, once when she was driving, she was still in England at the time, she went through a village and she got speeding points. She didn't know the camera was there, and unfortunately she didn't see the camera, so when she came back through the village she got even more speeding points. that sort of half hour in her life does not mean that she was now more likely to have a crash, and it didn't mean that she was a dangerous driver necessarily. She could have paid probably a little bit more attention to things on the side of the road. But that worked. It influenced her behavior. And I think that we can move to a stage where we can actually attribute performance and risk ratings to people. It's been done in other sports, and it's worked in other spheres. We call ours the EquiRatings Quality Index, and I just want to talk quickly in the last few minutes about what is really the essence behind these individual ratings. And the first is individual responsibility. You know, taking back to that example of the points for speeding, that's influenced her straight away to actually be a little bit more careful. That's going to be the same. If your level of performance, your outcomes at a certain level in a sport are showing high levels of risk, and your rating is starting to drop and starting to get to towards a level where you might not be able to compete, it's saying to you, okay, this is on me. This is not the regulators saying that we have to apply more rules across the whole sport for everybody. It's actually saying that you're in control of your own performance to a level, and you have to take responsibility level. To influence the behavior. So for people to say, well, okay, I've calculated now. Consequences have actions. Regarding our ability to perform. We've always, the negative outcomes have consequences, but we can, at high level sport, we can be very good at ignoring those consequences. To promote training and education, so when you're running into problems, that your solution is actually to say, right, I've got a system here that's telling me that all is not well and all is not where it should be, so I will seek training, and I'll seek to try and improve my performance that way, which is a really important element. And I just want to finally leave it with that concept of raising the bar, of saying that actually we want performance to be higher. If the performance is higher, the risk is lower. And I don't want to leave it to chance. I think it's about time for talking about change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Please, again, store up your thoughts and questions. Right, the final paper in this session is from Jonathan in Eventing. So, Jonathan, welcome, and over to you.
Your Royal Highness, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me today. I'm glad that Michio and Sam have gone before me, because that takes a lot of pressure off my quite simple presentation, I think. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what British Eventing do to manage the risk, as Sam was talking about, and different things that we cover. Course inspections. All courses at all British Eventing events are inspected the day before start of competition by an approved BE steward and technical advisor. All the fences are checked that they are safe and within the rules of the class. Every fence course is measured, its height, top spread, base spread, jumper width, and it's allocated a fence type and profile. This data is all recorded by the technical advisor and held in the BE database. Now, the falls that happen on these courses, the fence judges fill in a full report form, and this gives all the details and circumstances of what's happened. This information is also then transferred into the database. And by doing this, we can analyse this data, and it enables us to see type of fence where falls occur, level of courses that have falls, circumstances that are common in falls, any trends that might develop, and improvements we can make to that course in future years, or types of fences we can improve profiles of. Every year, the Transport Research Laboratory carry out an independent audit of the season safety data to look to see if there's anything that could lead to improving safety across cross-country phase that we haven't seen, that they look at from their expertise. We've been collecting data now since 2002, so we can calculate the percentage risk of serious injury from each type of fall. The unseated rider only has a risk of 2%. How can we improve the outcome of a fall? Through course design, we can use frangible devices, which mean the fence might react in stops. We can improve ground lines on fences to make the profiles more nicer. And something else we've been looking at is colour and definition, which I'll come on to in a minute. PPE. We've heard Michio talk about hats and everything, and as he touched on, we're in a bounty scheme with Beta, so any rider that has a fall and has a concussion, we take their hat off them, that gets sent into University College Dublin, be tested, and in return that rider gets a £100 voucher towards a new hat. Body protectors. We insist on a high standard of level 3 body protector that the riders have to wear. So when they've actually put body protector on, they zip it up, they've got a level of protection. Then if they choose to wear an air jacket on top of that, that might give them added protection, but an air jacket only gives protection when it's inflated. So by insisting on the level 3 body protector, they've got protection from that the moment they put it on. So reducing the risk, what can we do? When a competitor enters the competition, they have minimum eligibility requirements. And that means they have to have qualified up the levels when they go to a certain level. And also we've been looking and working with EquiRatings and looking at their, as Sam says, the ratings that people have and the chances of how well they're going to do at that level and whether they're ready to run at that level. Training. We have an incident and discipline list. So if someone is thought to be riding recklessly or in other ways bad behaviour and stuff, they get put on these lists, and these are referred to the next official, the next event, so they can make sure they're not doing that again. If they are seen to be riding dangerously, more than one event, they'll then get referred to somebody from the list of BE coaches. So they have to have some training. We also have horse fall protocols. So if a horse falls twice within a 12-month period, it gets referred and looked into, and again, gets referred to training. See something we've done about making it jump better. So research we're involved in. The HEADS project, we've talked to Michio about that. EquiRatings with Sam. Risk factors in horse falls. Heather, who's pushing the microphone around here, is helping us. She's doing a PhD from Clissold College, and she's looked into all of our data and looking at what other things might influence horse falls. And equine vision, which is a very interesting project that Sarah Paul and Martin Stevens have been doing down at Exeter University. You might have seen in the press recently and on BBC Radio 4, there's been some work they've done with the BHA as well, as to steeplechasing, whether the orange knee rails and toe rails are the right colours for horses to see. And some of her work has suggested it perhaps isn't a good colour. So I'm going to show you a few slides from her project, which I find very interesting. I hope you do. So the background to the project is trying to understand how horses' vision affects the way that the horse sees fences and jumps them, and other features in their environment around the course. So you see the bottom pictures here. The one on the left is what you see, the show jump there. That's how you see it. And you can see on the right, that's how the horse sees it. The current work that's been going on is investigating fence edge visibility. Images taken at Bixton and Babington, at the B90 and 100 grassroots level, and at the 4-star at Babington, and a range of show jumps at different levels. Woody and orange coloured edges are particularly low visibility. So you can see here that some of the grass and the woody fences just blend into one for the horse and aren't very defined. Can you see these all right? Yellow and blues improve fence edge contrast. So it's obviously important that a horse can read a fence well before it can jump it. And here you can see with the yellow and blue use, it does define the edge of the fence. Particularly here, you can see now on the show jump at the top there, we see the orange and greens look very clear to us. The two pictures at the top where the horse sees it, those all blur into one really. So the white is the thing that the horse sees clearest. Again, here in different types of light, at the top is what the horse sees and the bottom is what we see. They don't see any of that bright orange at the side on the wings. So in a summary, what they found, the work they did last year, is woody and orange coloured edges in particular have low visibility to horses. Yellow and blues improve fence edge contrast. The shade and texture, this is an interesting one, matte and gloss paint colours strongly influence the, whatever that word says, I can't read it. I can't spell it anyway. The lighting conditions, bright sunshine versus cloud, can strongly influence the jump appearance. And more quantitative data on faults and horses' vision is to come in the work we're doing this year with them. So the key future questions they're going to look at this year are how do light conditions and weather affect the perception of fences in eventing? What are the roles of a acuity, distance, perception and field of view. Role of visual distractions around the course and fences. We heard earlier from about the horses shying at things and seeing ghosts out the ground with its little bag. Again, the same thing around the cross-country course, things that horses see that frightens them, what we can't actually see that it's going to cause a problem. And what role training? Is this something that trainers should be using in a training tool to get horses used to things they're going to see out in the field in competition? Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Right, if those four panellists can come up here, we'll have a little question and answer session, please, to look at this whole question about equestrian safety. We've, as usual, got microphones, bit of luck. So, any questions, thoughts? You've had four very different, but actually pretty related subjects. So, thoughts, questions? Yeah.
Sam Chubbuck from World Horse Welfare. I've got a question for Alan. Firstly, thank you for everything you're doing to improve horse and rider safety. I, in my personal drivings around the lanes, often see horses and riders out, bay horses, riders wearing dark colours and no high vis. And I always want to say something to them, and I don't know how to address that in a sort of tactful way, a non-confrontational way. I'm sure I'm not the only person here who feels like that, and I wondered if you had any advice on if there's anything we can do in that situation.
Don't. The only reason I say that, I feel exactly the same way as you. I see it, even going past the British Horse Society headquarters. You know, I'm chatting to Lynn about something, probably getting a rollicking, but
nicely, I'm sure.
Nicely. There's a horse that goes back, and I'm looking through the window, and I'm saying, Lynn, look at those riders. I really don't know why. And our research with the Transport Research Laboratory, if you were to read that, there is no way that you would go on the roads without wearing conspicuous clothing. There really isn't. And I find it incredible that riders still go on out without it. Because now we've got scientific evidence that proves it. So depending on how tactful you are, if you know them, up to you. But there are some people out there that would that have their own views and just don't want to know.
Lady down there, and then...
Hello, I'm Claire Gabriel from the Pony Club. I'd like to ask about hats. Do children fall off differently, and do their heads behave differently when they fall off?
Unfortunately, but we haven't had necessarily access to the children data, so it's a great question, and hopefully we can answer that for you in the future.
There was one at the... yeah. And then...
Hello, Nikki Hudson, I'm a chiropractor. Following up from the lady's question on rider safety on the roads, one of those horses that were killed earlier this year, I happen to know, the incident happened at dusk. The rider had no high vis on at all. The horse somersaulted over the car and was killed on site, and the rider was seriously injured. Regardless of responsibility, he shouldn't have been there. He shouldn't have been riding in those conditions. Is there any comeback on him?
Right. Well, what I would say is insurance companies do look at what the circumstances were in the accident. So again, you know, if you go out on the road and you don't wear conspicuous clothing, it's not going to say that your insurance company won't pay out, but they might not pay you as much because you haven't actually taken as many factors or responsibilities as you should. And again, it's tragic, tragic circumstances. And you just wonder what a rider's thinking, all right, themselves, but their horse. The horse doesn't have a choice. We put the conspicuous leg bands, but until that time comes, I'm afraid the riders have to take responsibility for themselves and the horses, but particularly tragic, I know.
Okay, there's lots of questions. Right, one in the front and then one up the back. And then Peter Clark at the back there.
Nigel Oakley, most of the questions have been with regard to riding horses. I drive brewery drays quite regularly on the road, and modern day motor traffic doesn't seem to have any idea of what horse-drawn vehicles are all about. In fact, excuse me, the London breweries have packed up, and one of our main concerns with heavy horse is to find a viable use for it. Have you any thoughts on what can be done to improve that situation?
Okay, in London, I'm having a meeting with the Metropolitan Police on Friday, and we're discussing how the Metropolitan Police can perhaps help with this close pass operation with their mounted branch unit. If you're having a problem at your particular brewery, maybe I can ask them with their tactics and the way that they're going to run this operation. Maybe they can come and perhaps have a chat to you, and you take one of your drays out and see where it goes. But, you know, again, we talk about carriage drivers as well in the same way as we talk about horse riders and horses. You know, we tell drivers when you see a carriage on the road, and there was that dreadful accident with the funeral cortege where the car overtook and cut in and took out that leading. So we're sending the same messages out to carriage drivers as well as horse riders. But I'll have a chat with you afterwards. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Lady up there.
Hi, I'm Lynn. I'm an equine that went through. Yes, certainly, if a rider is found partially responsible for an accident themselves, i.e. they weren't visible, losses and injuries, but their insurance company, if you have an insurance company, may well be liable to pay some of the driver's losses as well. So there's the sort of speeds and the times they're driving, that sort of thing. And I was, if they're driving well, then they get a discount on their insurance policy as an incentive. And I was just wondering if there's anything, for example, the BHS could do with your rider insurance policies that employed the same sort of reward-based tactic. So if riders are shown to be wearing incentive, which doesn't seem to be working.
Well, I don't know if it's working or not. I think there's work to do, but yes.
Sorry, yes. Your scheme is definitely bringing it to a lot of people's attention, but you've highlighted yourself, and we've all highlighted that the message is getting through, but maybe it would get through even more if people thought they would have a financial incentive, because they might just think, well, I'm popping out for a 5-minute ride, what could happen?
Do you know what? I totally agree with you, and I would like to engage the insurance companies with that, and we have a mechanism that we can do that. But the other thing I would like to say is our ride safe training and qualification. I would love to see that if riders take that and they pass the assessment, that also maybe has an effect in their insurance. So they're going out on the road, they've taken our ride safe qualification, they've passed the assessment, and they get some incentive for that. But I totally agree with you. In fact, I'll have a word with you afterwards as well, if I may.
Peter Clark.
Thank you to Rural Insurance. Devon, I'm appalled at what I can say is an old-fashioned word blackness by a lot of the horse riders. Not all of them by any means, but an awful lot. And if you've got some younger fit people who don't like horses anyway, and they aren't thanked for slowing down, what do next time? They put the boot down and go as close as they can to the horses. So I do feel...
Again, I totally agree with that, and we run rider and road awareness evenings around the country. You know, having 80 riders there, 70 riders there, 100 riders there, and we actually say, thank drivers, love them. Even if you're saying it with clenched teeth, thank you, say thank you to drivers, love them and they will love us. You know, wide eyes, big smiles, you know, and I totally agree with you. And that's what I'm saying, is a shared responsibility for this. Horse riders and drivers.
And on that basis, most riders are drivers. Very few drivers are riders. Now, I have a question for the two on the end here. Sparked actually by that concept that you have cars which can monitor driving. So how would you monitor riders? The only option seems to me to be in a helmet somewhere. Does that then affect the research you can do? How safe could a helmet be if you included that in it? And would the data support that kind of development?
Sure, yeah. So one of the good parts have, I guess, video at the moment. Now, in terms of monitoring kind of everyday accidents, people are kind of looking at putting helmets or cameras on helmets. Now, what the influence that is at the moment is still a very kind of question and hasn't fully been answered yet. Accelerometers to put in your helmet. So these could potentially give an estimate of, okay, was there an impact here? And those kinds of things would be helpful to monitor everyday kind of impacts.
Yes, and the use of wearable devices is definitely producing data that once we have enough of it, we can analyze it and then see is that giving us some significant readings. And we've had some interesting conversations today of companies that are doing that and investing a lot in it. For a whole wide range of things. We could actually start getting data on the safe times of night to be riding. If you have a tracker on horses all the time, if we could see that trackers, trackers that are out later at night are having more accidents, that could be interesting information. We're talking about heart rates. I think there's been work done on that to do with horses getting tired towards the end of a course and potentially being more likely to fall then, and that could tell us about fitness. So I think that the possibilities are endless and going down that road to do, and please get in touch.
It's going to be a busy coffee break. There are all sorts of conversations going on. Yeah, there.
Hello, so I'm calling from Tracker or Horse Ring Technology, so Tracker for horses. So just on, I had two different things. So one thing is if we're open to any discussion about how our tracker could help for the safety also in the sport. So again, talk to me if you want afterwards on that. But my other question was about, because I'm an engineer, I'm interested in the latest products about helmets. So I was wondering, I saw these things for cycling, these airbags for cycling, where you fall and you have the airbag, and now we all know the airbags as body protectors. Is there anything coming with helmets as airbags, or what is the status on that, or is it just not feasible and protective enough? I don't know.
There's nothing that I know about it in terms of airbag helmet in equestrian. I'm sure it could be feasible. Probably talk to the Swedish developers who developed for cycling in the first place. That might be a good place to start.
So you haven't looked at it yet at all?
We haven't looked at the airbags for helmets, and I'm not sure if any other group who has at this time.
Okay. Jeanette. Sorry, we've got on there.
Thank you, really. Jeanette Allen from the Horse Trust. I just wanted to throw something else into this very august panel that's shown us some truly terrifying things today. And that is the importance for anyone involved in equestrianism to have a very good knowledge of first aid. And the reason I mention that is knowing someone who came off their horse in an indoor school at a private livery, had actually sustained fractures of their C1 and 2, and the livery owner took their helmet off. Luckily, the lady managed to keep all her bodily functions due to an external fixator because she didn't move her head, but she could have been quadriplegic or dead. So let's take the equipment seriously, but let's also know what we're doing to bodies when something goes wrong.
I mean, I think we'd all completely agree with that. I mean, I think that's a very, very important point, to be honest. Anyone want to comment further? I mean, I don't think... Just, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jeanette, for that. Anybody else got any comments, questions? Rolly.
I work for a charity and Jonathan hasn't done anything, so
yeah,
I thought I'd give you a go. Frangible pins, obviously have been a lot in the press and the world of eventing. FEI recommend it but don't require it. Australia now require it. What is...
It's been used where they can for some years now. And America have now gone down the same line. There's another frangible device come to market as well, called the MIMS clip, which works slightly differently. But again, it is potentially can make offence safer. But at the end of the day, all these devices, they're there to react if a mistake is being made and there's a nasty fall happening. But it won't work for every fall. There's so many different mechanics in falls and the way they happen. And we've seen horses rotate without even touching a fence. Just the way they land steeply, they can rotate over their own front legs. So there's no one solution to fix all. It's a matter of training, you know, as I said, making fences profiles nicer and, you know, looking at all we can. But I went to a safety management thing the FEI ran a few weeks ago, and there was a presentation there that 86% of accidents are caused by mistakes. So what we've got to try and do is stop the mistakes, whether it be the horse not making a mistake or the rider not making a mistake. If we could try and reduce that a bit, that might help.
Miles.
At an early stage, Miles Williamson Noble, I'm doing this as a hunt follower. At an early stage of my life, I went to the neurological ward at Addenbrooke's, since when I have always worn the chin strap on the helmet I've had. In the early days, it had a cup over my chin, and since then, underneath. A large number of the hunting fraternity still maintain that if they have a properly fitted Patey hat, they don't need a chin strap and it will stay on. And I suspect quite a lot of recreational riders also don't wear chin straps. Is there any data to support the frequency with which hats without chin straps do come off in a tip accident, and generally, you know, it's head first that it comes down to?
Interesting question.
So, like, our research mainly focuses on kind of the mechanics of impact, so I'm not too familiar with that field that you're discussing right now in terms of actually coming off, but my personal suggestion would be wear your chin strap. That's quite possible, yeah, so I would say wear your chin strap to make sure your helmet stays on your head.
But this is an interesting area. You can't enforce it. It's down to common sense and almost peer pressure.
I think the pony clubs do great stuff.
Yeah.
By making sure that all the pony club members are generally the crash hats and chin straps. So I think the young are being educated, but I'm not sure that knackered old blokes like me have necessarily taken the message on.
We couldn't possibly comment, Miles. Any other questions, or shall we have a comfort break? You all done? Right, well, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, there's one more. Yeah.
Siobhan Dillon from the Institute of Applied Equine Podiatry. I'm just commenting about the use of reflective gear and stuff like that, because I've done cycling, running, as well as horse riding in my time. And constantly I see cyclists out there in dark clothing all the time and at night. Sometimes they have absolutely dazzling lights on them, but they are frequently also without coloured clothing that can be seen easily, and particularly when they're travelling at speed and they're so narrow. So I think it's generally a cultural thing and a human thing. And really, rather than just focusing on riders, it's trying to find the human thing that actually changes your mentality so that people will wear the reflective gear. So, because I see all vulnerable users out there in dark things that are so easily could be hit, you know, even if you are driving at steady speeds.
Yeah. I think it's a perfectly fair, good, sensible point. Yeah, yeah. Anybody? Yeah. Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for that session. Please thank the panellists, and please, we've now got a 20-minute comfort break. If you could be back, please, by 3:10, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, that was really good.